the purpose of this is I'm actually going through the same exact exercise of business planning as you guys should all be doing it too, which is understanding a little bit of what has worked well this year. This year has been a really wild year, right? In the beginning of the year, the hottest market in history, to be fair, and then now completely different. The game has completely changed. And so whatever your business planning could have been for the first 6 months may not be the same as what it is now. And now is the new normal, right? And so we want to think about, okay, well, really, you can almost break it down in two ways. You can break it down of what your total volume is this year and plan accordingly. Or you may even slice that up and say, what was my volume in the last 6-7 months? Because that's probably what's going to be happening over the next year or so. So it's really up to you how you want to do your business plan, because your financial planning should be based upon that too, right? Like you shouldn't be spending like crazy with previous numbers, whereas the new reality is different. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so those are the thoughts, and that's what I'm going through myself. I'm doing the same exact things that I'm about to share with you, and how I break it down and how I kind of understand the business, and also what I need to be adding right now so that we can move on to next year. A lot of the things that you'll be executing will want to be done right now, right? Because then you have right now 2 months to get the actual ball rolling, start implementing things. Maybe you have some hiring goals, get all these things going on right now, because right now is slower than other times. We are approaching the winter holidays. So it's a really, really good time to either rest up for the following year, but also get ahead of several things. So given we have a lot of people on this that don't necessarily know me, a little bit about me. So my first decade, I was in tech, I was in software sales. Last year was my 3rd year in the business. I did 73 million production. And this year, a big change of mine has been growing a team. So we will still do more than we did last year. And we're also adding a lot more agents under our core group to help us expand, because I also understand I can still do more than what I did last year, but I want to add more people, scale in a different way, but also continue to just grow my team. So that's a little bit about me and where I'm going through, and how you can maybe reference wherever you're at with your journey of how it can apply with what we got going forward. I do have some announcements. So for the people listening, I'm going to post this also on YouTube, but also for the people that come in, if there's anyone that you know is doing, let's say, between 4 to 10 transactions a year, that's kind of the sweet spot with where we're at, because we're a small team. We have 4 agents in my team right now outside of myself. And so we're going to keep building and growing with those that understand, like, it's difficult in this business, but if you're doing between 4 to 10, I can help you double your volume. Just by doing the different things that I'm doing, by all the coaching that I'm doing every week. And then certainly for those that do more than that, then yes, absolutely. We're bringing on a lot of people at EXP. So I personally am talking to a lot of people at Compass, at Keller Williams, just because right now, as finances are tighter, this is like a really, really opportunistic time for ourselves to see, like, do you still have the packages that you had at previous brokers? Does it make sense for you to leave? Now, I did give you guys all homework assignments, right? And the homework assignments are to understand where you have been in your business, like what is the goals of this current year? Where are you relative to those goals? Where did they actually come from? Because each of the different pillars will have its own approach, right? So that's very, very important to understand. And I'll share a little bit about mine, but I'll happy to share about like how you would plan accordingly. But the first and foremost is we're going to be going through a pretty long grind. That's how I'm having my mentality. I'm having my agents have that kind of mentality. It's a lot of sweat equity that we will be putting in over at least the next year. It's going to be rough at these levels because we are at 7% plus mortgage rates and rising. Like it's not going the other way anytime soon. And so it's just a new normal. There will still be a lot of transactions that happen. So give you an idea, Santa Clara County still has 1,000 transactions that occurred in October. So things are still moving, but if you compare that versus last year, that is 30-something% less, right? So the reality is there's going to be a lot of changes. There's going to be a whole lot more work. As you may see through all your own transactions, everything just takes a lot longer and a lot more effort to get things across the finish line. So the question that you want to ask yourself, and I have everybody do this too, is what is your commitment level? Like you should write it down. I've seen some people even write it down on a laminated sheet. Like, why do you want to be in this business? Does it still make sense for you to be in this business? There's a lot of people that became agents not long ago, and it may not make sense for you to be in this business anymore, right? So the reality is you got to understand and see for yourself. You got to understand and see for yourself, like what is your motivation? Why do you want to work hard? Why do you want to work the 60, 80 hours a week now to do 30 hours a week previously, right? This is a very important mental decision to have, or to be fair, decide if it's another career that's better for you, that's not as stressful, not as difficult. So once you do that, you want to write a message for yourself. And the next is accountability. Like, what if you look at your year and let's say your goals were X, to do 10 transactions, 20 transactions a year, whatever it is. Did you hit those goals? If you didn't hit those goals, what do you feel was lacking to be able to hit those goals, right? Is it you have these lofty goals, but day to day, you're not actually on top of it? And this is a very important reflection time to be honest with yourself, to say, yeah, maybe I need some help. Maybe I need to join a team. Maybe I need to hire and pay somebody to be a coach, right? You can pay groups like Tom Ferry. You can pay, there's no shortage of coaches out there. But it's also important to decide what is it about the coach that can be helpful for you, right? Like, I didn't have much success with the Tom Ferry coaching. I have another coach now, but everybody's different, right? And so you may want to interview different people. This is the time to do those interviews. They're all trying to close out their year. They're trying to all get some business. You're going to be able to get some pretty good promos with anyone that you might want to interview and join from a coaching perspective. And so this is a good opportunity for that, to see if you need that accountability and that guidance that you may not have been having. Another thing is, maybe you just need to be part of like some sort of mastermind groups. Now, that's a similar idea. There are paid ones too for that. You can either create your own separate pod, or there are paid ones to have, but you can form your own, you can reach out to others, you can start your own. And those are things that can be done when it comes to getting accountability. The next, and I brought this up, is back to their commitment level. Why are you here? Why real estate to begin with? Hey, come on in.
It's been fun.
It's been fun. Sorry about that. Please grab a seat. Hey, good to see you. Yeah, you can grab a seat. We're going to use this screen. So you feel free to sit over here.
Yeah, I need
Yeah.
to.
Excellent. And then we all record this. No. You don't need it. Thank you for coming. Yeah, no, it was a small typo. Ideally, I had some homework assignment, but it's fine. You can take notes. Otherwise, I'm fire. Please have a seat. We're already rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah. No worries.
Precision is everything.
Yeah, it's all good. I had some homework assignments I was sent, but we'll go over that later on either way. And this recording will be sent. So the other reason is, why are you here? This goes back to the commitment level. Why real estate? It's going to be a grind as we move forward. Those are important. And the next thing is the vision side of it. So what we're doing today is really the goals of the following year. But then the question is, what does your business look like in 3 to 5 years, right? And how do you work backwards to try to get to that number? Because a lot of the processes that you will be doing will be different if you're trying to do a different goal 3 to 5 years. So for example, my goal in 3 to 5 years is to have a bigger team. Well, if one wants to have a bigger team, there's a transition period of how do you go from an individual producer, which I was last year, to actually being as part of a group, being part of a team, being part of a team. And that's a different level of effort. That's a different level of effort in terms of how you allocate your time, right? Because there's a point, and we see a lot of fast growing groups grow where, let's say they have 10 to 15 agents. At that level and that kind of production, that's maybe doing about 100, 150 transactions a year from the team. It may not make sense for the individual to still produce versus just bringing on more agents, spending more time coaching, and getting them to increase their production by 10% is already probably more than what that individual can do. So you can see your goals and your time allocation and your efforts are completely different depending on what you want to do. Now, there are still many mega producers that did a ton of business that are solo, but it is your personal goals as to where you want to be and what's important to yourself. So this is the point that I asked you guys to do, which is a breakdown of your stats of this year, right? So you should all have this. You should not be scrambling to do this right now. And if you don't have it, you should be able to easily pull this up. So for those that are live here, that's a breakdown. What I like to break down a few buckets. One is past sphere. So your client base, your past sphere, like what percent is that? You should know very well right now, instantly, what those numbers are. You should know the volume. You should know the transaction numbers. Those are all important. You can also break it down by sellers and buyers. I would say that's a very important bucket. So you should have a bucket understanding of that. And we'll talk about what you can do afterwards with those people. You have number two, which is paid sources, right? So if you're using Realtor.com, Zillow, Google, PPC, Facebook ads, anything that's a paid online source, you should have it broken down by individual source too. So you should have that broken down, right? The next could be other things, could be open houses, right? Maybe you do a lot of open houses and you get business that way. You should have that broken down. And then the last real bucket that I would have or the last two, I would say, would be geographic farming, right? So if you do farming, you do mailers and things like that, you should be tracking the production of that. And then last but not least is the agent referral side, if you are getting agent referrals, right? So those are like the main buckets that people will be going through in terms of how they get business. If you're able to pull this instantly, then that's great. If you can't do it instantly, I do use a tool called sisu.co. I can give you a referral code. What Sisu is, it allows you to easily see your analytics of all the past transactions. It's a transaction management tool too. So I use that a lot because it's really easy for me to retrieve these numbers, especially if you want to look at it like month by month to see like how things are progressing. Like those are all like reasons and very easy opportunities to be able to track like how are things progressing, where are things moving, what do you have pending, how many do you have closed year to date. So I use Sisu. I've been using it for over a year now. It's not an expensive tool, but it's a very beneficial tool to understand like the health of your business, especially if you're trying to scale up or you want to know your profit levels and things like that. So that's very important, right? It's understanding what are your goals today. And for the beginning, for those that have missed, how I would look at your goals, especially of planning for next year, is you can do two things. You can either break it down of how your production was for the first 4 or 5 months and break it down what happened over the last 6 months, right? Because the market has completely shifted. So you can have your business planning around that. Or if you want, you can have it for the whole year and then plan accordingly. But I would be a little bit more conservative if that was the plan. Because once you understand that and you can start planning your goals for next year, you want to do some math backwards too. So for example, let's say for me, I generated, I don't know, 10% of my business through Zillow leads. And I spent X dollars amounts for Zillow leads. And let's say your goal is to double that. Well, unless something miraculously happens, you're probably going to want to spend double what you spent to get to that number. So as you do your business planning, if that's your goal, is saying, look, I want to get more business out of Zillow, there's two ways to do it. You either can convert at a higher level, or you pay more ads and pay more you pay more to get more leads and opportunities. And so that is an example of the business planning side of the 2023 goals, right? So you need to also figure out, okay, what are the goals, but also you want to be realistic. How do you achieve those? What do you got to do in that lead bucket to do it? Whether it's improving your skill set, there's a lot of courses and a lot of training they can see all over of how do you convert online leads at a better level. Then that's a part of it. Or you also have to spend money, or you have to do both. So that's how you can start planning of like, okay, if that's the bucket that I want to do, how do I build upon that? And this is an exercise that I do. This is an exercise that you all need to do if you want to have a little bit more accurate of assessing what your goals will look like next year. Now, I'm going to talk about the different things that I would be doing for each individual aspects. Now, for most of us, as they should be, your sphere is going to be generally about 60% of business. Now, it can go plus or minus. Mine is actually lower than this. Mine is 50%. Others can be higher. You figure it out yourself. But if you want to grow more, what are the things that you should be doing instead of just waiting for them waiting for them to come back and reach out to you for repeat business, right? Are there additional things that you can be doing to be more on top of mind, to build deeper relationships, right? What are some ideas of actually doing so? So here are some of the things that I've crafted and done myself, and I continue to do. So I have monthly appreciation events. I like to host smaller ones. So like something with like 10 to 14 people. I hate those big ones that have 50 plus people, because you don't get to talk to people. People aren't actually talking to you that much. It's just too massive, right? And it's also too infrequent, right? You're only doing it maybe every 6 months or every year. And so it doesn't make too much sense financial wise, but also it just doesn't allow you to go deeper with the people that you want to connect with further. So I like to host these smaller ones. So they could be all sorts of things, like examples. They could be, I have an art workshop this coming Friday. They could be Top Golf. They could be like not wine tasting. It could be just happy hours. It could be movies, right? There's a lot of these different things that can be done when it comes to hosting these smaller events. And then you can also curate and pick who to invite, right? So you can decide who do you want to invite, who do you want to be on top of mind again. So you can really curate who are the top people of that list, right? The next is, some people do this. They do pop-bys, right? This is a great way to surprise people. They can do pop-bys of giving some sort of small gift. That brings up conversations again. So those are good opportunities I've seen others do. I incorporate a tool called Client Giant. So Client Giant, what they do is every 3 months, they send a gift, and there's different packages that you can choose from to your clients, and they'll get shipped to them automatically. That's a good way to stay top of mind. I like to do client dinners. So I do a client celebration dinner after we close. That's a great way to meet people and learn them more. At the same time, you can always just do catch-up dinners. So I try to do a dinner every single week with somebody that's either in my sphere or a past client. I'm not paying for it. We're just having a casual dinner like any friends, but you can be diligent of it, right? Because at that time, you choose who you want to have to grow a deeper relationship with, who do you want to foster relationships. And so that's the fun part of it. Just like anything else, going out and having a nice meal together, you have spending 1-2 hours to really get to know somebody at a much deeper level. You can certainly do a lot of the other things, which is phone calls and texts. So a lot of people like to catch up with people, right? That's not a bad strategy. As you can see, the most inexpensive strategy. So catching up with people over the phone, those are options. I would also suggest that you should all be connecting with all of them via social media, right? Connecting on wherever platform they're at, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are all very important aspects to just stay in touch. You just never know if they're seeing your posts, and you just never know. Like, those are just passive ways of them seeing that you're still in the business, you're still producing, you're still doing what you're doing best at. And so that's very important. And the last but not least are some sort of events. Was her name Susan? Okay. Sorry, so it's like, one sec. Sorry about that. So yeah, so the other thing is you can mark it down, and most CRMs have the ability to do so. So the CRM that I use is called Sierra Interactive. And there's different like categories that you can have, and then you can also create like different reminders for that.
What's it called? I'm sorry.
Sierra Interactive, like Sierra Mountains Interactive. So they're a very good tool. I would say the top 2 CRM tools, if you're gonna, and we're gonna have a section on tech in a little bit of, do you want to make any changes with tech? As I mentioned, given this is the winter time, this is the best time to get all these things going if you want to make any moves of this different applications. But there's different sections I can have if you know their birthdays, if you know their home anniversaries, right? If you know a life event, like there's so many people that are having kids these days, right? So you can have those kind of life events of wishing their kids a birthday or sending them some sort of gift when it comes to that. So those are all opportunities when it comes to SOI of going deeper if you're not. Because at the end of the day, if your business is 60% at least of this, why are you not putting more effort into your existing network? Right? I mean, just do the basic math. a Zillow lead costs a few $1,000s per lead. They're still good because of the conversion of it, and it's still good to grow the circle. But why are you not doing that kind of investment for your own sphere? Makes absolutely no sense if you're not doing it, right? So you got to take care of your own people first, and this is a way to do that. Then the next is your growth plan, right? So the reason why my sphere is 50%, 60% is because I'm growing quickly. So I can only rely on my core, and I can only spend so much, but then I also want to add more people into that group that don't already know me, right? And so what are the ways to do that? The ways to do that is those additional pillars that are paid sources. So in this case, all the examples that we brought up, right? Whether it's farming, so how much are you farming? Are you doing it at a proper cadence? Should you do more of it? It could be online leads, so Zillow, Realtor.com. It could be the PPC leads, like Facebook ads, Google PPC ads, right? There's different platforms, and there's so many infinite providers there when it comes to there's this infinite providers there when it comes to all the different tools of them leveraging those platforms to be able to help. So there's no shortage there. So the question that you can think for yourself is, should you be adding, and do you want to add some of these, right? The Facebook ads and Google PPC ads are longer cycles. They're more top of the funnel. And so if you add it today, you may not see anything for 6 months plus, and that's normal. So you have to be able to have that endurance of it and that investment in that funnel for you. At the same time, you should also understand, like, are things not working? That's why you're looking at history, right? If it's not working, like for me, for a long time, I did farming. I spent tens of thousands of dollars, got nothing out of it. And so I'm like, I'm not good at farming. And so I need to cut that all together. It was just a complete burn of money, literally burn of money. It must have been over $40,000, $50,000 spent on farming, and there's nothing, right? Barely even opportunity to interview, right? And once I interviewed, I wasn't good at competing against all those mega farmers, right? So you have to understand the whole game, and can you compete in that game? And if not, you got to decide, should you keep doing it, or should you reinvest in the things that are working, right? Because a lot of these things, like let's say Facebook ads are working and you're able to generate X amount of business. Why are you not doubling or tripling down on something that's working, right? You don't need to spread yourself thin, right? I mean, there's some people that dominate farming. So they do hundreds of thousands of mailers a month, twice a month, because it's working. They're not touching all these other things that don't work for them. So it's also important for you to understand, yeah, maybe you had a very experimental year, as I did, of testing all these different things. Now you got to look at your books. Did that make sense for you to do? And that's incredibly important. And that's part of, should you cut anything? Should you be doubling down of anything? Should you also invest in a new pillar that you were thinking of that you haven't done yet? Those are all things that you need to understand from a growth perspective. Next is about business-wise. So business-wise, the question is, where are you with your business? Like, where are you transaction-wise? Where are you just, how do you leverage your time better, right? So I look at it as several different milestones. If you're doing, let's say, 1 to 15 transactions a year, so you're doing a decent amount of business, the very first leverage that you have is a TC, a transaction coordinator. Now you can hire them per transaction. So there's many different services that do that, whether your brokerage has services or you just find these companies that do that. There's plenty around. Or the other option is you can pay and get a virtual assistant to do that. So I have somebody at the Philippines that does all my transactions for me. She's been great at it. I would suggest you guys can look into this company. It's called Sphere Rocket. Sphere Rocket. They do a lot. Yeah, like a sphere of influence, Sphere Rocket. So they're an excellent source too. So the benefit of that platform, and I'm sure I can give you a referral code to help you guys out too, is they actually do a lot of the vetting themselves first, and then they give you a chance to interview different people. And then at that point, you can decide if you want to go with them. They have an insurance plan. That's up to you if you want to have. So an insurance plan will, if that person leaves, they will then find a new person without you paying a finder's fee, right? So that's been a good thing for a lot of people to have. And that's kind of the annoying part, because sometimes you have turnover when it comes to these different things. So that's an opportunity there. but you have to just remember, if you do decide to get a transaction coordinator, this is the time to get it, because you need to train them. They don't already know how to do TC work. And even if they knew how to do TC work, they may not know how to do like the individual things within your own brokerage, right? Like EXP has SkySlope, Compass will have something else, Keller Williams has something else, right? There's just all these different like back-end things that you need to train them manually, even if they were familiar with TC work. And so that's a good opportunity, and they're fairly inexpensive, right? Like you're paying $4 or $5 an hour for these people. So if you're paying, $400 to $500 per transactions, and you can do a certain amount, there is a period where it makes sense just to hire a person, full staff, that is handling these things for you. But keep in mind, you do need to babysit them. You need to train them. You need to keep your eye on things so that they can learn, because they need to learn all the paperwork that you already know. The next thing that I would say is, if you're doing 15 plus transactions, that's a definite point to hire an admin, whether they're local or they're not. You definitely need to have a local person, an individual, to help you with a lot of the things that you're already doing. It could be also they're doing some transaction stuffs. It could be different operation stuffs. It could be different social media things. They can create social media content for you. They can create your flyers, right? They can order all this stuff that you would order anyways. Like all these like logistics things. They can send out newsletters, send out emails to other realtors. Like these different things can be done by someone else and should be done by somebody else, right? Because if you're doing 15 plus transactions a year, that's probably about $15 million of business a year. So that's, in your case, that's maybe what, 300,000 a year in income. So if you do that math backwards, your dollar per hour is roughly about $150 per hour, right? You can afford it, somebody for 40K, 50K doing admin work, because that's $20 an hour tasks. Whereas you're $150 per hour, as you can just easily see from a basic math equation. So those are important things of just scaling wise, what you should and shouldn't be doing. And the next but not least is understanding your margins. As a solo person, your margin should be, including everything, should be about 70%. If you're not that level, you're probably overspending too much, which is okay, depending on where you're at. But as a solo agent, you should be pretty lean. As you grow a team, that margin continues to shrink depending on if you're still producing or not, right? So if you're growing a team, then you got to look at your books. It's okay to be less than this, but it also depends like what % of your business is from you, which is a higher margin, versus somebody that's now on part of your team. You got to feed them. You also got some regular expenses to deal with, but you're also taking a split that's usually much less than, like, it's just much less, right? So it's important to understand, like, how does your margin stack against what should be normal, and that we're not going gun-ho of just buying a bunch of leads and spending a bunch of money and not keeping it for ourselves. So that's incredibly important. Whether you look at your business, you look at your brokerage, look at the splits, those are all important of what you are actually netting. So if you're at a brokerage or a team that you have 90-10 split and there's no cap, as an example, that 10% is part of the caps, as part of that margin. Because you're talking about gross. You have to always look at gross, and then subtract all these different line items. Marketing expense, different. You can pay yourself salaries. You have your brokerage splits. All these different line items are part of what it should be for being 70% plus. The next thing to go over is, and I want to wrap things up in two more slides, is your tech stack, right? Your tech stack is important. So whatever you're using, are you happy? Are you having all the support you need from your technology solution, right? And the few main ones I would suggest everybody have, and other things are extra, is a good CRM. The top two CRMs right now that most people use that are either individuals or groups are dominated right now. It's either Follow Up Boss or it's Sierra Interactive. Those are the dominant paid ones. Why are they the dominant paid ones? Is because they have a lot of integrations to a lot of platforms. They also consistently iterate on their platform and keep improving upon things. There's nothing wrong with these other CRMs, but it's also important to know, like, what is a CRM? I hate the word of the CRM of the future, but really the CRM that is adapting and adjusting to continuously improve their tool. To be fair, there's nothing wrong with the solutions that may be from different brokerages, whether it's KV Core at EXP, Compass has something, Keller Williams has something. There's nothing wrong with those. But in my opinion, it's best to be agnostic to it because the last thing you want to do is have everything wrapped into something that you're dependent on and now you can't even leave. That's very important. And number two, what is the one that actually has a team and business model that keeps improving upon it? And those are the two main players for that. I talked about Sisu, highly recommend getting that. You'll need some time to implement it. It's a very powerful tool. I use it to track my analytics, so I can see all the data of like how many leads I have, what's my conversion of the leads, how much I'm paying for it, what's the ROI of the leads. All of these things are easily accessible via dashboard. So an analytics tool, Sisu is by far really the only real analytics tool in the industry. So they've done very well, and they can play in with these other CRMs. There's tie-ins with those other major CRMs. And then last but not least, if you don't already have, this is more for project planning to keep yourself more organized. So you can use like Trello, Notion, Asana. They could be helpful for you to manage your listings of what you need to be ordering, because you have like different checklists, right, that you need to do for each listing so that you don't forget. So you can create boards and have that pretty easily. Maybe there's a marketing sheet you need to do. Maybe there's this and that. Anything that has a checklist you want to have here. What's also important to have here is what we're about to cover now is you got all these different things that you still need to sit down and do, but now you got to map it out. Like, what exactly are you going to be doing in this next month? What exactly are you going to be doing for the next quarter? We can all get hyped up today. Spencer, you shared all these genius ideas. These are all good ideas. I love it. I love it. I love it. 3 months goes by. You'll be like, oh shit, I didn't do anything. So you have to be very diligent upon yourself of having in a project plan somewhere that you're going to be able to see constantly, so they can remind you that this is what you need to do based off of this strategy session, this discussion, because this is what makes sense for your business. Because we're all going to see, especially as time goes on, there's always a shiny object somewhere. And then you're going to get distracted of, was that shiny object something they should have been chasing? When you go through this exercise, you can go through those shiny objects now, but then you can solidify what are you actually going to do, so that you're not going back and forth later of, I said I was going to do farming. Oh shit, there's this other solution that does PPC well. Okay, I'm going to now do that and I forget about farming, right? All those tools and solutions work, but they take time, and then you have to keep practicing your own skill sets within that, right? If you're doing a farming, the skill set is being really, really good at listing presentations, because you're going to be competing against all those other farmers if you get called in, right? You're not going to be the only person that gets called in, because they're going to see a bunch of other pieces and they're going to interview all of them. And make no mistake, you're going to be interviewing with some of the best listing agents because they do a lot. So if you're going to do that, you should also know how to have that system automated, but at the same time, also be very good at the skill side of it of doing listings. Right. So, but everything can go deep, right? Google PPC. You should be really good at having the conversations with online leads. That is very different than a referral that comes in. Right. So those are all individual things to be practicing on. So those are the important things. Once you determine what your game plan is of what your goals are next year, you got to write it down and then have a project plan of what exactly are you executing. Maybe it's a migration to Sierra. Start having that project plan so you don't forget it, and then go through that whole migration. It's not instant, right? These things take a long time, and there's a lot of things you can go deep into these platforms too. So it's not just migrating, you don't do anything with it. It's migrating it, learn the best practices of it, implementing the best practices in it, refine that. It's an ongoing thing, right? Within me at Sisu, it's ongoing. There's so much you can do in this one platform. You don't need to say, oh, it's off the list, move on to the next one. That's a terrible idea. All right, so I talked for a good 30 minutes. I'm going to open it up. I do want to be respectful of your guys' time. I said I was going to end at 1:30, so we will end before then, which is in 15 minutes. But any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now, or anyone in the room too. And if you're on the Zoom, you can unmute yourself. Any questions from you guys?
Yeah, I had a tough time, I think, this year, because I had officially my first few listings. And I think that was the hard part, getting everything on Asana.
Right.
And I just, just overwhelming.
Right.
And I felt like part of my other business suffered because of that. Is that just kind of what is your take on that? Or
yeah, so the question is, there's a few listings that came in through the year, and because of that additional workload, some other balls may have been dropped because you're focused on
Yeah, doing a great job.
on doing those, like doing those well. And so those are there's many components of that, right? The first time it's okay because it's new and it all comes, but there's no excuse for the second time that situation happens that you're not ready, right? So the way that I look at it is like, okay, it's okay to struggle in the beginning, but are you doing anything different of the business? Or if this same thing happens again, you're in the same situation, right? And so what are the things then, right? Is the things are like within any of these project plans, you can have checklists that can be automatically created so that once you have a new listing signed, you now know very clearly what are the steps I need to do and when they should be done, right? So it just keeps you mentally organized. That's number one. Number two, the question is, what is the production that you're at? Should you have an assistant to help with a lot of these like manual things? Like, for example, does it make sense for you to order on like signposts, like ordering a sign there? You're probably doing it.
Yeah.
But the answer, the answer is, does that really make sense for you? Like, is that really that skillful to do?
No.
Right.
And that stuff I think burnt me out too.
Yeah, but it's
like
exactly.
tired
See,
of
that's a great thing, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody's minds, if you actually think about it, can only do a few good tasks a day. So if the more like even the very small, minute checklist items will drain you. Like going on that site, even though it's a 2-minute task, it's a 2-minute of diversion of doing that thing. And imagine you have 10 of them. Like your day, you're drained. You're like, oh shit, I just did all these different things. Like I'm exhausted already. And it is exhausting, but it's not, you need to do it, but it doesn't make sense for you to do it. Right. And so a lot of these tasks, as they come by, you should already be thinking, does it make sense for you to do it? And generally, you probably not, and you probably need to get an admin to help with that. But a combination of organization of like a structure, like what they call is like a standard operating procedure is important. And the other is potentially a person to help. Those two are what will solve something like that so that that situation doesn't happen again. Otherwise, you haven't learned anything.
So I've got my Asana checklist.
So you got that end, then there's a person end, right?
Pardon me?
Then it's the
I've got
person
the
side.
procedure,
Yeah.
Person side.
Then the person side of it. Because then they can see what you had in mind and they can be the one ordering those different things for you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it's important on both. And then it's also good on you because then you can see what the checklist is, where is it at? Yeah. Are you behind on that? Things like that. Any other questions?
Yeah, so regarding your lead follow-up, that you obviously on the phone all the time, is what made you decide to go with Sierra?
So there's several core things that I like of Sierra. Number one, at the end of the day, it's still important to have a CRM. So the question is, why did I go with Sierra with the follow-ups? There's several reasons as I made my conclusion. Number one, the most important in primary driver is some sort of like automated reminders to do a follow-up. So for example, you can create a little task due on yourself. Like, let's say I'm going to call XYZ tomorrow. But what if you call that person and they didn't pick up? You would have had to manually create another due task to call that person again the following day or whatever you think it is. But you are not going to remember to do that. Let's be very real. We need automation to help us remind us that it should just be a daily or a weekly thing. And so what's good with Sierra, and very few CRMs actually have this, is some sort of reoccurring reminder, right? A reoccurring reminder, follow up every day, follow every 7 days, follow every 30 days. Because if we did that effort and we didn't hear from them, which is not, it's not like unlikely, it gives you the reminder to follow up again to the following day, right? So I like that level of automation, that task list to do. I also like the aspect of you can have automated text and emails and voicemails that come out of whoever you want to have that for too. So for other individuals that I can't get a hold of anymore, I have my ISA, my inside sales agents calling them manually. I don't call them anymore. And I also have text, emails, and voicemails that get dropped on the cadence that I want. Now you got to create the content for it, but it goes automatically. Those are the two main drivers, especially as you get more and more opportunities and leads, that you try to still not drop on these buckets, like drop juggling these, but that's also important. So those are huge drivers, Most CRMs do not have that.
And when you're reaching out to your colleagues, do you do the all three thing? Call them, text them, email them?
Well, because I have text, and it depends on where the situation is. If it's just somebody that doesn't have an automated text and emails, then yes, I would do all of them. And it's all logged in there too, right? It's all logged in the portal. I can see when was my last effort. If it's a automated one, then my inside sales agents are calling, then they don't need to text or email. It saves them time too. They're just calling, they can leave a voicemail or not, and then move on. But there's some drip that's happening. So it saves them time too. Right. So it just depends on where they are at with the journey.
Do you use any of the bots?
No, but you could use the bots. Like there are many of the bots. I personally haven't found the value of it, but there are many bots you can integrate with, like Sierra. They have that too. Go ahead.
What percentage of the business comes from video specifically?
Video is so the question is, what percent of my business comes from video? So I think of video as a lot of things, because the video is also then repurposed to all my different social media. So then it gets me top of mind of like value add content. But if you're talking about specifically YouTube, business is about 10%. So it's not like a huge piece. I would like it to be bigger, and I'm doing more and more efforts to make it bigger, but of the relative scheme of things, it's still 10%.
So the majority of the business is coming still from the paper clicks?
No. So it's about, my business is broken down about 50 something to 60% of Sphere. That could be people within my network, could be on social media. It's 10% YouTube. It's about 20% on paid. And then the rest could be open house, miscellaneous stuff.
What are your favorite paid shows?
I do 3. So I do Zillow, I do Realtor.com, and I do Facebook ads. I mean, by far it's going to be Zillow, just because it's the lowest hanging fruit. It has a decent return for me. I mean, Zillow and Realtor.com will be by far those two, because it's just a lower hanging fruit. The return isn't going to be as good as others, but it gets me into areas that I want to be in. And that's one of the benefits of those platforms, is like you're targeting areas that you wish to also continue to grow in, right? So you don't have to choose an area that you have been servicing. You can choose an area that you want to be in. And now you're growing like a group in a funnel there. And eventually they can become hopefully advocates of yours, send you business and things like that, or be repeat clients, things like that.
How long were you farming before you decided to put it in?
I would say 6 months plus, something like that. And it's very difficult because you don't see much return on that. And I'm not a good farmer of it too. I might have done it too big, may have been too frequent. There's just so many things that's harder to measure. And that's the hard part about farming. It's just so hard to measure that, unless you can get listing out of it. But I haven't. So then all of it is 0% return. It's negative, massive negative, right? So everybody has to understand, like, you don't have to be good at everything. You have to be good at a few things and just go deeper into those things, right? We have 4 agents right now, and we're growing, and we'll continue to add more. Okay, I want to be cognizant. We have 5 more minutes. Anyone on the Zoom that you want to unmute? Hopefully you guys could hear everything this entire time, but anything else on your end? Otherwise, we will wrap up soon.
Hey, Spencer.
Hey, Robert. Yes.
What percentage of your time goes to recruiting or agent attraction versus sales? And how do you allocate that? You know, where in your day, where in your week do you allocate that time?
It's a good question. So at the end of the day, it goes back to the vision, right? And it goes back to what's important for you in the business. For me, what's important for me is I still produce individually. I still want to do that because it's a cash flow thing, right? At the same time, I want to grow a team, but growing a team is not instant. Just because one person comes on doesn't mean they're going to produce day 0, right? And so there's an onboarding of that. So I have to balance myself. I have to balance my own time accordingly of, I want a good cash flow because I want to make a lot of money still, and I can make a lot of money as an individual, but I also want to grow a team for the future. And so because of that, then I see as myself, I have an inside sales agent that calls about 4 hours a day that sets up appointments for me. So that's a level of scale. right? Because I'm not doing these calls. So that's option one. And then option two is dedicating your own time to do those calls, to do follow-ups. Like I have more and more people that connect with me on social media, on Instagram. So having people on those dialogues, right? So I do now 2 days a week out of the 7 days of combination of prospecting, follow-ups, outreach, which is prospecting. That's how I would think about how I allocate my time now. So I spend 2 days a week.
Thank you.
So Matthew asked, what does your daily time blocking schedule look like? So time blocking is usually I actually don't host these this early, but it was because it was so hard to get a conference room, and it's just so hard to get a conference room. So I try to get this as late as possible. So usually my day is 9 to 12 is follow-up. Now it could be follow-up, as you can see, from recruiting agents to join my core team, recruiting agents to join the brokerage, or prospecting, following up on my previous leads and opportunities, doing outbounds. I still do that today. So 9 to 12 is that. 12 is when you catch up on previous emails, whatever else has come in. I'm not responding to usually emails during that time because it's all outbound activity. And then the afternoons are appointments. It could be these kind of meetings, could be these kind of, could be events, could be networking events, could be showings, could be strategy calls, et cetera, et cetera. And then the evening time, it's either your own downtime, it's reviewing disclosures, like things that are not that time sensitive, right? These other things that aren't like needed at that time, but is needed to be done. So those are how I would allocate what my day looks like. And the weekends are different. Weekends, I try to host open houses as much as possible. Those are lottery tickets. That's the way you should think about them. They are straight up lottery tickets. And so I do as many open houses as possible on the weekends. And then any showings that are needed on the weekends too.
I know you still hosted open houses. What percentage of the business did you talk about?
Open houses are really positive right now because things are actually on the market longer. So these are huge and easy ways to generate new leads in business. So I love it now. When the market was hot, I couldn't get a single open house. Everything was selling in 1 week anyways, and they're going to use their own agents or whoever hosts. Now things are stale, and there's not that much traffic in. So the reality is people have to be on the grind longer. And I like the grind time. This is a sweat grind time. So I love it now. I love this kind of market right now. This is a game time. So those are all opened up again. And so we have a ton of, we do as much as possible. There are lottery tickets. There are ways for us to show value. And so we like that a whole lot now than before. It sucks as a listing agent. Selling a place now is way harder, it's way longer, but it's just
Still
what it
looking at
is.
listing the buyer.
Depends, right? Like kind of and not really, right? Kind of not really. If you have a buyer that's actually,
Buyers are moving targets.
it's kind of not really, right? If you have a buyer that actually was, they're mentally
Cash
okay with it, not even cash, if they're mentally okay with it, there's so little competition. Like you're gonna probably accept that offer that comes in because there's only one offer that will probably come in for a lot of listings now.
Yeah.
So it's works both ways, right? So it's not like as skewed as it was before, but it's its own problems now. But if you can get them the initial hurdle of them wanting to buy a place, then it's really, really easy to get a deal done. Really easy,
Yeah.
right? That's just the reality of what it is.
A little get the buyer.
A little
Yeah.
off topic, how are you helping buyers and sellers through high interest rates and for some of your favorite solutions?
Yeah, so the question is, how am I handling, and this will be the last question as we wrap up, how am I handling these questions of buyers and sellers? So sellers is very difficult. You have to really qualify them also upfront and be realistic of, in the past, a listing was a guaranteed paycheck. It's not a guaranteed paycheck anymore. It could be a negative paycheck, to be fair, because if you spend all this time and money and you invest in them, you spend time and money on it, and they can cancel you because they don't want to drop to a reasonable price. So it's a very different game now. So it's very important to be open and say, this is all the data, this is what is actually happening. Here's a game plan, almost like preempt them of understanding like this could happen. Now we don't want this to happen, but it could happen, and see how they react to that and make that mutual decision. Do you want to take on that listing or not in this market? So that's one aspect. The other aspect is the buyer side is very important of understanding what is the motivation to begin with. And there's a lot of different coaching for that is excellent. I would suggest you look up and Google Phil Jones. He's one of the best speakers out there when it comes to knowing what to say. He has a book on it too. And then the other person that you definitely need to look at is Hatch Consulting, Robbie T. Hatch Consulting, just Google them. And they do a lot of like boot camps of really at the end of the day, everything that we get right now is fear-based objections. And so the fundamental question is not trying to argue with them like why this is a good time. The fundamental situation now is, well, why were they looking to buy to begin with? What was their motivation? And going back to the motivation. That's the only thing that they need to be focused on, right? And that's the thing they get to be very, very good at having the dialogues. So all of our agents are going through script practice, role plays of this for that reason, over and over again, because it's why are you even looking to begin with, and getting that out of them and going back to that, because their alternative is still a bad situation. It's still that motivation is they want to get out of rent. Rent is higher. They wanted more space. Nothing has changed from that, right? So those are very important things to go back on and continue to rehearse on and get really, really good at those dialogues. And if you listen to Ravi T, who's the best inside sales agents training in the world, in the country, they go over that over and over again.